Whether at home or work, life is about relationships. Welcome to Small Change, Big Dividends with your host, Branch Isole. Small Change, Big Dividends shares steps, tools, and tips for personal career and spiritual growth. So please welcome the host of Small Change, Big Dividends, Branch Isole.
Have you ever known someone who constantly blames others for their failures, their troubles, their shortcomings and problems? Or someone who makes every excuse imaginable why something in their life is out of control? Sure, we all have, right? My wife once managed a customer service-oriented business, and people would come in and make their payments, coupled with tales of all kinds of woes or excuses about their life. They would ask her opinion, and she would politely suggest different options they might consider. And for every solution offered, there was a reason why it wouldn't work. Not yet knowing her suggestion, not trying it, not even considering it. They had already decided, and each had a reason why there was no way it could be considered as a viable possibility. They preferred to stay in the dilemma they had created, rather than actually employ a solution that might resolve their problem. Look around. They're everywhere. People in our families, in our social circles, at work, even on the commute to work. Excuses, blame, falsehoods, fake answers. The truth is, life is full of false statements and lies. We lie to others. We lie to ourselves. We lie to avoid accusations and recriminations. We lie to avoid responsibility. We lie to get what we want. We lie to avoid what we don't want. We lie to get ahead or to get an edge on our competitor. We lie at work. We lie in our relationships. We start lying as soon as we're able to understand the concept of right and wrong. We embrace fabrications and excuses. They become ours. They become comfortably enveloping us in their arms. We start with a teaspoon, and soon we graduate to a shovel. And then we keep trading up in shovel size. Today, we're going to put that shovel down for 30 minutes. Coming to you from deep in the forest, near the banks of the Ouachita River, you're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and you are my featured guest. Small Changes, Big Dividend is a show where your questions are part of the program. So if you have a question, email it to branchisole.com. And thanks for joining me today. Each week, I share mana'o with listeners around the world. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we talk about personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. Today, I'm going to share some small changes that can pay big dividends in your relationships and in your life. Because whether at home or work, life is about relationships. But it's healthy relationships that encourage and embrace growth. Last week, we started our Powers Within series, and you saw how power of thought can reduce stress, struggle, and conflict by changing relationships and lives, literally at the speed of thought. Today, in part 2 of our series, we're talking about the power of choice and consequence to avoid adversity. Choice and consequence is an interesting one, and one we should take seriously, because each of our lives operates on choices choices and decisions we often make without thinking, without any real analytical reflection, or by even asking ourselves, what's in my best interest before I jump into action here? Most of our choices are answered with automatic responses. We respond consciously or subconsciously, focused on the primary goal or thought, what's in it for me? If I decide this way, if I choose this path, what will be the outcome for me? Many of our old pattern decisions have become fallout focused. Now, what do I mean by this? It's not so much about the choice before us as it is the result or the consequence of that choice. Meaning, what will this consequence, outcome, or fallout do for me? We're offered a choice, but we focus on the outcome, usually an immediate short-term result. Or we wonder how a particular consequence may help or hinder determining our immediate or future goals, desires, and ambitions. We abandon the power of choice in pursuit of the immediate outcome. And if our perceived or anticipated result doesn't align with what we believed we wanted, we may totally ignore the power in the choice. This "what's in it for me" question is our natural state. It's our natural inclination and natural desire. It's our human nature, if you will. Every choice has two options, an affirmative and a negative or rejection. This is the spark initiative or pivotal moment where the power of choice resides. Because from this moment comes the act, the action, or the response that will ultimately lead to a consequence or result. This is where the power resides, in the choice, not in the consequence. We've got to analyze the possible outcome and its place on the scale of what's in our best interest. But we must not forget the power in the choice. It's through recognition of the power in the choice that leads or motivates our decision to act or respond. By recognizing that the power is in the choice, we put the consequence in its proper position, which is second. The consequence then won't dictate the choice if we understand that the power rests in the affirmation or the rejection of that specific choice. Let me give you an example. I go to a party and I drink too much and I'm inebriated. So I have three choices to get home. I can drive under the influence. I can hire a cab or an Uber or Lyft, or I can catch a ride with someone at the party. I think about my dilemma, and I know I've driven home successfully before after drinking too much, so I know I can make it home, right? But can I? What are the potential outcomes or consequences if I drive? Well, I can get home, I can get stopped and possibly get a ticket, or I might possibly be in an accident that causes harm to me or others. Here's the problem with driving under the influence. Every time I roll the dice and tempt fate by driving inebriated, I run the risk of the odds being stacked against me, with a pending negative outcome that might affect my entire future. If you've ever been to Vegas, you know they didn't build it by letting gamblers win. The odds are always in the house favor. The same is true in life. you're rolling the dice against a system designed to test, tempt, and challenge you up to and beyond your breaking point. Now, the next day after the party, life will go on, whether you're at home in bed hungover, or in jail, or in the morgue. Life will go on. Your future, on the other hand, may or may not go on. Why? Because your entire life, your entire future, perhaps your career, family, or health, hang in the balance and may be compromised every day in the future by one miscalculation of choice and consequence to avoid adversity last night. A simple cognition of what's really in your best interest gives you two other viable choices to get home safe and sound. It's in your power to avoid adversity. Let me share another example. Do you think God exists? Yes or no? That thought, that belief in his being or not is a choice. And from that choice comes actions and responses. Here's another. Do you think your pet, if you have one, or your child, if you have one, can be taught a certain behavior? Your choice of how to answer this can lead to certain behaviors by you that can help develop or hinder and or determine your pet or your child's responses to change, choice, and consequence. Now, before we get too far in the weeds, just realize it's the choice, not the consequence, that holds the real power. The choice allows you to have initial say-so before the consequence comes. The consequence only allows you to take a bow or clean up the mess. Perhaps you've listened to a podcast where a guest shares their story about overcoming adversity. These were once known as Horatio Alger stories because each had a theme of perseverance, grit, and gumption while striving for success rooted in a dream, a goal, or an ambition. In the face of adversities, these stories all had an ultimate change of outcome in the hero or heroine's state of struggle. But the veil of the story's action, behind which there was always a moral or ethical lesson. Perhaps you've heard of Aesop's fables or the Canterbury Tales. We could go all the way back to the ancients, to philosophers and soothsayers, to oracles and sages, to find stories, fables, and tales that entertain, delight, or teach. But the bottom line is all of them were morality plays. We're going to take our first commercial break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about the easy ways to avoid the holes of adversity in daily life. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold, Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and we'll be right back.
If you seek a courageous advocate, prepared to champion your rights with consumer service agencies that support aging populations, Carol Ann Hamilton is the one for you. Carol Ann is an elder care coach, author, and speaker with 250,000 hours lived experience successfully supporting uncopable aging parents. As a result of a challenging journey, Carol Ann revolutionizes how stressed out caregivers restore serenity to their worlds. She also brings over 25 years of change management expertise in Fortune 500 settings to catalyze urgent transformation within the elder care industry. Carol Ann is a popular speaker at conferences across North America. She has appeared via TV, radio, and print globally. Now you can tune in weekly to get a dose of her inspiration plus down-to-earth advice to cope with even the most difficult aging parents. Listen Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on Bold Brave Media and TuneIn Radio. Have you ever felt like no one is listening or you're not getting the honest attention you deserve? Do you even know the kind of attention you want or need? You are not alone. Alice Aspen March is here to help. Thanks to Alice, through her epiphany and research over the word attention, there are solutions to the attention dilemma. Worldwide audiences have been enthralled and engaged for over 40 years with her visionary and pioneering observations. The kind of attention we get and give is vital to improving our lives and society. Alice and her weekly guests review game-changing insights for transforming and improving our understanding of attention, providing techniques for creating healthier and empowering behavior. Get a new perspective on a mainstream word. Tune into Why Our Attention Matters for fresh and thought-provoking conversations every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on BoldBraveMedia.com and the TuneIn Radio app.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. This is part 2 of our series, Powers Within. And today we're talking about the role of choice and consequence in avoiding adversity. When you hear a podcast host or guest share a how I overcame adversity story, what do you think? These gems can be entertaining, but the fact is, each story is the teller's tale, and their circumstances are not necessarily the same or similar to yours. Many of today's podcast guest stories try to express in 30 or 40 minutes what may have taken years, even decades, to accomplish. That's why the real value is only to the storyteller, not to the listener. While these recalled steps to glory may entertain, or a particular story may leave you with feel-good vibes and appreciation of what was experienced, after the episode ends, each listener goes back to their own life. Your story is your story, and your challenges are yours. So here's the key for today's show. Instead of attempting to overcome adversity, it's infinitely easier to avoid adversity altogether by stepping around the holes. It's always easier to step around a hole of adversity than digging yourself out, because it's in the actions of avoiding the adversity where the power of choice actually exists. We often forget for every choice we make, there's a consequence, large or small, with short-term or long-term impact. And every choice contains consequences of possible reward or fallout. But what do we mean by consequence? Everyone knows the word, but what does it truly exude? Usually, an immediate desired outcome may be in the forefront of our thinking, so much so that we can overlook short and or long-term effects on us. But even more importantly, we may forget or ignore how our choice can affect others in our lives. This kind of action and behavior often leads to repeating a cycle that allows us to jump in that hole and start digging. And then to make things worse, we keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper until it's a hole of disappointment, despair, damage, even possible danger. And if we remain in that hole of repeated negative behaviors for long enough or too often, our perceived escape mechanisms can become even more harmful, more dangerous, perhaps even more deadly than we ever expected. Many people, when faced with a choice or decision, only see the anticipated outcome they desire. They become laser focused on the goal they want or expect to the exclusion of all other possibilities, even if a similar choice in the past was costly. They look at their new or next choice through eyes that only see what they want. And in many cases, the more we want it, the more blind we can become to any possible negative results. And this can be a very tenuous way to live. The easiest way to step around holes of adversity is to recall previous choices and their outcomes. If you see mentally red flags lurking in the shadows of a new choice, you need to pay attention. People, like animals, are creatures of habit. And when our behaviors become comfortable through repetition, we may start to experience each within its own comfort zone, even if that is a place of comfortable misery. You know, we want what we want. And oftentimes, the more we want it, the less likely we are to see the spectrum of other possibilities, good, bad, or ugly. So let waving red flags be a beacon, shining light on your next or new possible or pending choice. Remember in our last episode when we were discussing the power of thought? One of the advantages of focused thinking is it often requires and encourages critical analysis. You know, this was once a well-practiced skill, and it can become less acute with more reliance, either in total or primarily through assisted thought processing with our technical devices, our technology. And don't get me wrong, the world of technology has opened up everyone on the planet to information and knowledge previously unknown, or at least more guarded or cloistered. Technical devices now allow information to be exceedingly unleashed and unfettered. We live in a world, in an era, in an age where we can literally access any available knowledge on a device held in our hand. But like a coin, every technology has two sides. On the one side, we have access to the world. On the other side, the world can have access to us. And the question becomes, at what cost? What is the price of our interactive isolation by withdrawal from the physical presence of others, or by eliminating face-to-face contact and personal interaction? Many today rely with total confidence on what they are told, shown, or encouraged to believe is true through their technical devices. They have total faith in what they see and read on the internet and therefore believe to be true. Now, this information, misinformation, or disinformation may appear true on its face without regard for a deeper look or a background or fact check. One of the elements of intelligence that sets humans apart from every other species is our mental ability to think critically and employ rational thought that can be shared verbally or communicated in writing. When our days are filled with only streaming technology devices, we can start to lose that human edge to our critical thinking and analysis skill sets. Face-to-face interaction still allows for more in-depth responses and nuances. And without critical thinking or analysis of information, we can start to believe statements of misinformation, or worse, propagandized disinformation that's not in our best interest. Falsehoods from all of this information can affect us as individuals, as members of groups, tribes, neighborhoods, communities, nations, even as a world citizen. But this relinquishing of critical thinking and analysis skills can blur the focus we need to make good, sound choices in our best interest. These results in additional beneficial and positive consequential outcomes for us and the people that we care about are the primary goal. Our recall of a previous choice or consequence, along with any red flags associated with those experiences, should be our first line of defense and our first response to guiding a new or next choice that we face. There also exists hand in hand with this recall of previous experiences and their consequences, a way to ensure our choice of options that are available when we face a new or similar decision from before. This practice is seeing into the future for application in the present. In the 1960s, the University of Texas football team under Coach Darrell Royal succeeded with a tremendous powerhouse running game. And after each game, the sports writers would always ask Coach Royal why his offense never threw the ball. He'd politely pause and say, "When you throw the ball, 3 things can happen, and 2 are bad for your offense and your scoring." Now, that's the practical, secular side of this discussion about choice and consequence. It's what I call Life 101 reality. But as a practitioner of spiritual Christianity, Life 101A, each choice I face is an opportunity to seek help because I have an active spiritual relationship. And therefore, I'm able to call upon spiritual strength for free advice. And you can too. 2 weeks from today, in episode 8, we'll talk about acquiring spiritual grounding and using spiritual strength. But for now, know this. Using spiritual strength to see a future consequence or outcome can be that little edge for success tomorrow. And sadly, it's an edge many people don't have because they choose to ignore its possibility. For those who choose to see the future through spiritual strength, they can readily attest to knowing their future by being reminded of their past in light of today's choice or decision options. We're going to take our second commercial break. And when we come back, we have 2 questions from our listeners. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold, Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and we'll be right back.
Tune into It's All About You with host Dr. Martha Latz, a lively weekly broadcast on BBM Global Network, one of the most empowering shows for time-starved, overscheduled multitaskers. The professional expertise of Dr. Latz is directly available live every Thursday at 1 p.m. to answer and address concerns about relationships, life transitions of career, meeting, dating, and committed relationships. It's All About You with Dr. Latz will expand your understanding of current concerns across your relationships by broadening and expanding possible solutions in developing skills for mutually desired outcomes. Dr. Martha's expertise is as a licensed marriage and family therapist, life, transition coach, and all things to do with communication at work, home, and with friends. Check out her website at auniquetherapycenter.com.
The opiate epidemic has reached crisis levels, and with so many families affected by addiction, opiate-related drug overdoses, and death, the time is now to have a real constructive conversation about addiction that could lead to better prevention, treatment, and recovery. Alan Charles, author and keynote speaker on drug abuse and prevention, presents The Alan Charles Show. Alan brings a message of hope, sharing his unbelievable story of surviving a 24-year addiction to cocaine and highlights from his memoir, Walking Out the Other Side, an addict's journey from loneliness to life. His raw honesty and courageous heart breaks the stigma of addiction and offers a unique perspective into the mind of an addict. Join Alan each week as he brings his listeners to a true understanding of the grip of addiction. It is only with this understanding that we can begin to heal. The Alan Charles Show, Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Each week, we answer questions from our listeners, and this week we have two questions. The first one comes from Claire in Detroit, who asks, I keep listening to podcasts about personal growth. Are there things I can do or know that will help me? It's a great question, one that many people wonder about or struggle with. So Claire, here's some bullet point behaviors to keep in mind as you go through your day. Number one, come from your highest loving self. Embrace, see, know, and live with truth as an active awareness of your daily behavior. If you're unsure how to recognize truth fully, be sure to keep listening. Next week, we've got an entire program on the power of truth. For 3 parts of our Powers Within series, our topics will be things, the powers you already have within you to call upon you to help get through your day. Our second point is to identify the invisible burden that we each carry through life, and this is an inactive spirit. Now, what do I mean by this? We each have a spirit deep within our soul, which originated from God as creator of a universe that we're part of. However, because we are and live in a physical world, our natural inclination in every situation is to only operate within its physical confines. Often, we totally dismiss any other influencing factors. Point 3, there's a 2-pronged attack many people perpetrate on themselves. It's essential that we overcome this 2-part emotional hurdle that keeps us from succeeding. The first is facing rejection when we hear the word no. And then by embracing it personally as a definitive evaluation of our life's worthiness. By believing we're defined by this single word, it has a power over us to a degree that we can become paralyzed going forward. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. When we absorb a sense of personal rejection through the word no as a personal affront, for many, the next step or response is to start beating themselves up. You know, so many times we're in a situation, we make a decision that doesn't turn out to be in our best interest. And we go back and we say, you know, I knew I shouldn't have decided to go that direction. I knew I should have decided differently. And instead of just realizing, let's learn from that lesson, we go on to continue to beat ourselves up about what the mistake we made was in the choice of the decision. That doesn't help us. You know, when we absorb that personal rejection through that word no, we continue to keep ourselves held back. So the first thing to do in that kind of situation is to realize the response in that particular situation only had to do with that particular situation. Then, for not being stronger and standing up for ourselves, we have to forgive ourselves and move on. The idea behind things that happen to us negatively is to grow from that experience so that we don't repeat that action. And the easiest way in this situation is to don't take no as a personal condemnation. It's just a word uttered by someone whom you're interacting with who is telling you that they are not interested in whatever we're offering. In so many instances, this word no merely is a response to that question, and it doesn't define us. Number 4, it's imperative that we learn how to break free and out of a no-growth zone. What's a no-growth zone? That's the place we find ourselves when we refuse to change, dismiss, or abandon old pattern behaviors that keep us stuck in a cycle of decision, negative result, repetition, and then faced with a new or similar same choice, we repeat that same or similar bad choice again. One of the purposes of our show and podcast is to help you transition from habits that you now experience without thinking about them as automatic responses and employ reflection or analysis of outcomes of those choices and decisions before we jump, before we pull the trigger. Our program, Small Changes, Big Dividend, is about transitory growth for more confidence, more competence, and more completeness in life through opportunities, steps, takeaways, and processes here on the program. Once we're responsible for our actions and the consequences of those choices and making better and more appropriate decisions grounded in the thought, what's truly in my best interest, then we start to grow out of the no-growth zone by not repeating old pattern behaviors and by realizing every choice, every decision gives us the opportunity to decide what's in my best interest in this situation today. You can do this by 2 distinct actions. First, reevaluating by seeing, knowing, and starting to understand who's holding you back or what's holding you back. And next, by identifying, and more importantly, paying attention to red flags in our relationships at home and at work. I'd like to thank Claire for that question. Our second question today comes from Jordan in Ohio, who asks, why do I not hear God? You know, many new believers or neophytes to Christianity ask themselves this all the time. On our journey, we finally find we're at the fork in the road where we have to decide whether or not we're going to give God a try. And when we finally surrender to his presence in our lives, we capitulate and then we wait. And we wait for God to respond. And in many instances, nothing happens. Why? We've surrendered with expectations of a response, and then we wonder why we don't hear from him. The truth is, God makes himself known and his ways known to us all throughout our day. They're easy to follow if we're aware of that presence, because it's we who manage to complicate our lives so much that we often miss his outreach. If you ask in and through the name of God, he recognizes your response to him, and he will respond to you. But when our expectations are delayed, we often move our potential relationship to the Lord onto the back burner again, sometimes with intentions to actually remove him from our life because we don't get that immediate answer. We're forced to remember that we live in busy times with many of our well-meaning intentions right on the periphery of our daily life that occupies our attentions through the people, circumstances, and situations we find ourselves. There's two things to know and understand about a spiritual relationship with the Lord. First, he's always available to hear and respond anytime, any day, any night. And second, the sooner you initiate this conversation, which leads to that spiritual relationship, the quicker his spirit can start working for you. Those who come to know God and know him better soon come to realize we all hear God through our consciousness of spirit, operating oftentimes at a subconscious level. You comically see the little angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder every time we're in a choice or a decision we've got to make. And the little angel is always reminding us of right and wrong, or reward and punishment. And the little devil is always reminding of the ways of the world that test and tempt and challenge us. Keep those little figures in mind as we continue to build on our spiritual growth. Remember, our connection of origination is with, by, and through God's Spirit as the creator of the universe. And for those who ask him into their life by inviting his Spirit through his Son to dwell with theirs, his new active spiritual presence can become a constant reminder of the choices through which we can and will act or react, either as he would have us respond or as we choose to respond with our old pattern ways that we know so well. It's in the moments of choice and decision that life offers up to us that fork in the road. Whether or not our spirit has been reactivated by his or not, we each hear him every time that we're embarrassed, ashamed, or feel guilty by a decision or choice we've made that's not in our best interest or that puts us at risk. These reminders are what we endure when we discover our attempts to put that square peg in the round hole, and then finding it wasn't the best choice or in our best interest after all. There's a scripture, John 8:47, where the reader is instructed as to God's listening and hearing us. And the scripture relates that the one reason we don't hear God is because we don't belong to God. When we choose to belong to God, when we choose to become a child of God's and have our spirit reactivated by his, we begin to hear and become motivated to acknowledge God's work within our lives. It's then that we see God working in small ways, but consistent ways throughout our daily life. As renewed sons and daughters who now start to respond to the choices and decisions in our life as God's children, his abiding spirit within us is our strength to use anytime. Thanks, Jordan, for your question today. We're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we'll talk about next week. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Thanks to Claire and Jordan again for their questions today. If you have a question, send it by email to branchesole.com. And join me next week when our topic will be the power of truth in this age of information, misinformation, and disinformation. It will be part 3 of our Power Within series. And in the next week after that, next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll be talking about spiritual grounding and using spiritual strength. If you're growing weary of what you can and can't believe, or of the things you're seeing and hearing, and wondering if they're truly real, what is fake and what is fabrication, the next 2 weeks are going to reveal how we can determine truth in our lives and what we can use it for. Thanks for joining me today on Small Changes, Big Dividends, where we discuss personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode today, please share it with them. If today's episode has been helpful to you, please give us a rating and review. And to know more about my work, I invite you to visit my website, branchesole.com, or my YouTube channel, Branch Isole. Today's show has been sponsored by Crystal Creek Farm. If you have a business, product, or service you'd like to share with the world on Small Changes, Big Dividends, send your inquiry to the website. You've been listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Until next week, all the best.
This has been Small Change, Big Dividends. When you're ready for healthier, more successful relationships at home or work, Small Change, Big Dividends is your show. Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.